No, I was
Maybe
just
try turning them up
during it because I could actually hear the birds earlier, like I've never been able to hear them before. So
that's because they were in your fucking window behind you. That's why.
That's probably fair too. So anyway, this interview from Eurogamer is actually a few weeks old, so we're not going to touch on all of it here, but there were a few things in here that I think should interest you guys. Nika's probably going to side with them, so we'll get a little bit of discourse here. Not intelligent discourse, but a little bit here. Now, essentially what this article...
God, you're such an asshole.
Yeah. What this article was sort of driving at is that FF14, the failure that was FF14 1.0 and what Yoshi did to turn it around, has helped to change the Final Fantasy series for the better. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read a couple
excerpts. Is that right?
That's what they claim. So I'm going to read a couple
Does that include FF15 or because the development was started on that 10 years ago?
No, that includes FF15.
Oh, bullshit. We're fucked.
We're going to get into it here.
We're fucked.
We're going to get into it here.
This whole fucking series is done. That's a torpedo. We're done.
No, it's better now.
No, it's not.
Eurogamer said so.
Horseshit.
All right,
Rejected.
So we're going to read a couple excerpts here, and we're going to go ahead and discuss amongst ourselves as we go through these. So the first one, Yoshi P says that, and this is in relation to coming back with FF14, that a strong relationship with the community is a vital part of Final Fantasy XIV. Feedback from players is very important to us. We wanted to regain the trust from players, and that's one of the goals that we wanted to achieve. We set that as a policy in the beginning that communication was really important.
Poisonous, vile murderers!
No, now this, I can respect this. I can get behind this because they're right. After the dumpster fire that was 1.0, if you want to bring players back to your game, if you want them to give you another chance, you can't just tell them, okay, come back now, it's changed. You kind of got to lead them through and show them what you're doing new. You have to recognize what went wrong with it and take some of their feedback. So in remaking this game and trying to reforge it into something new, which they did, he is 100% right that you do have to get the players involved.
Sure.
Because obviously whoever you had making it before had no fucking clue what the players wanted.
To be fair, I don't think that maybe necessarily the guys currently in control know what the players want, but all right.
Hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But then he goes on, and this is in regards to the streams and the producer live letters. He says that that's something that came from me myself, not from corporate, says Yoshida, of the more open-armed approach. When we started letter from the producer, other teams weren't really welcoming. I took a different attitude. I'm not like the corporation at the time, quite secretive and trying to protect themselves. I'm not like that. That's why the other teams didn't like my approach, and not everyone was on the same page. So he's kind of painting himself as being a little bit of a black sheep for doing things the way that it is that he's doing it.
I'll probably believe that. You know, like I would say that trying to get a corporation to do anything differently is a big challenge.
Well, and I think that comes from just the way that single player games have always been developed. Like up until obviously the advent of like message boards and forums and Twitter and social media,
right?
A game was just made and it came out. We had no way to do that interaction. So of course with an MMO, even though it's something that gamers and players consume on a daily and weekly basis, I think that inherently you do obviously have to listen to your players a little bit. Now with FF11, I don't think that was the case whatsoever. Tanaka was very closed off.
Yeah.
But in any other MMO that I played, like World of Warcraft, that was different. They were always a little bit open.
They were accountable to their player base.
There you go.
They weren't necessarily at the mercy of their player base, which is sort of what I feel like FF14's approach is that, oh, Steps of Faith is too hard. Ugh.
Do you think that because of the failure of 1.0, because this wasn't just a matter of, oh, they didn't like that, and there was a little bit of lashback, because there was actual failure that... You're right. They're not just being held accountable, but they feel like we are at the mercy of our players, and if we don't do what they say, if we don't give in to their demands, they're going to ruin us again.
Yeah, and the thing is that they too often listen to the people who are not going to be playing this game in 6 months anyway. That's the problem. Is that, you know, like, and I mean, I know that, you know, people accuse me of being an elitist or, you know, whatever.
No, that's Nika.
But the thing is that, you know, you need to develop content for your veteran player base, because giving them, 5% of your total game doesn't work. It used to be about 50-50, right? Like, you had all the content that you did while you were leveling, right? And then you had endgame content, and it was about an even split. And when you do it like this, like, I feel like, yeah, everyone gets to see more shit.
Well, the other thing you have to keep in mind, too, is on a long enough timeline, if you're retaining even some of them, your veteran player base is always going to outgrow the new people coming in, right? In Heaven's Ward, everyone was kind of like, okay, we still like this because we didn't know any better. But by the end, anyone who had played in a Realm Reborn in Heaven's Ward, once Stormblood come along, we're like, oh, we've seen this before. When the next expansion comes, anyone that's around from 2.0, Stormblood, and Heaven's Ward are going to be like, great, we're getting this again, right? And every time that it happens, you're going to have more and more people that are now seeing what's wrong with the game. So how is it that there are apparently more people or more players that want it changed to this casual system?
I don't think that there are, but I think that in your overall player base, like, I think that what FF14 is designed for is sort of what Yoshi P has said in the past, that it's designed for you to be able to play other stuff and hold a job down. And old MMOs were not like that. Old MMOs were like, look, if you don't put in the time, you're not gonna get the shit.
Oh,
right?
You know
like old EverQuest and FF11 and MMOs like that, they had a reputation even back then of like ruining marriages. And you don't hear about that much anymore, but you do hear about stuff like Facebook ruining marriages. You know what I mean?
We had an argument with Juxta on Let's Be Real last week when he started bashing all over Pokemon Go because it's not a real game. And we tried to explain to him that it's not designed to be something that you play all the time.
We talked about this.
Flip out and just
yeah. Well, but we talked about this exact thing last week too, where I was talking about Mr. Happy and how people malign Happy a lot, whether or not let's be honest, the guy makes a fucking killer guides. He explains.
I think they're not very good.
Shut up. Listen, he makes killer guides, he explains fights really, really well, and he's good. Like, he's very competent at playing the game, and all three of those are really, really necessary, and he's fast too, right? Like, he can get through new content very, very quickly, and all of those things are necessary in order to be able to make that style of content, because you've got people like MTQ, and you've got people like, I don't know who else is making guides now, but you've got people coming up behind you that'll do it just as quickly, if not faster than you. And I think that the most damage that's done has made it so that that's the expectation of literally every player. Not just your Mr. Happies, not just your limit break radios, not just your Aetherite radios, whatever it is, right? Like, that expectation is across all players. And what's interesting now is that because a lot of those, I've got to grind it faster than everyone else, because a lot of those people have fallen off and gone to other shit where they can grind their face off, the community that exists now is a little bit more patient. I say only a little bit because it's incremental, right? For example, and I talked about this last week on the show. I did a Rabinasty run where first group disbanded because they got stymied at the second boss. The next group I got put in, we were just, we were much more communicative, and we were able to make it all the way through the end. And it took a little bit more, more time, but that element of communication was there. And it's sort of like you've got to realize, dude, not everyone is going to put in that same amount of effort to grind for, the 325 item level, whatever the fuck it is, to be able to get it out. Like, dude, we all have other shit that we have to do.
Well, I guess what's upsetting then about Final Fantasy 14, because I get that, is that you've always been able, if you wanted to casually play an MMO. The only difference was how much content did you actually get yourself through. And I guess what we're all just upset about is the fact that, okay, I get it. Yoshi P's making a game that's consumable at more of a casual rate. That's fine. But
across the board, like, that's the thing, is that we all felt like we had to be miniature Mr. Happies. Like, we had to keep pace with it. We had to be faster than Happy because, fucking Happy's a fraud, man. And that stupid fucking Reddit mentality of, like, if you're not as fast as everyone else making it through it, then you might as well just not be playing this game.
And that's who they're developing for now?
That's not who, that's exactly who they're not developing for.
No, I mean, for the people that don't like that mentality, and they want to take their time, they want, because now you get 6 months, basically, to finish out content that, if you actually play it, takes what? A month tops?
Yeah. That and again, it's designed for someone who's playing it at the pace that I am.
But here's the thing, even if they were developing it like either FF14 or FF11 was, or WoW was, where there is enough stuff for, Nika to get on and play every single day, you could still get on and play it casually, Don't forsake your marriage or your job. Just put in a few hours a night. You're not going to be doing all of the content, but if you're playing it casually, why do you want to do all the content?
Well, because everyone wants to be able to get as much out of that purchase as the next person. See, that's sort of like the everyone has to be equal aspect to this game that I fucking loathe.
It's terrible, because whether or not it's casual or not, you're still getting the same amount of time out of it. So you're still getting your money's worth out of it. Like what are you measuring it by then at that point? Just stuff done?
Yeah, by what other people have been able to accomplish or experience that you haven't, that you feel locked out or walled out by. That's exactly it. And Yoshi P and the development team said, well, we don't ever want anyone to feel that way because we got so many complaints about Sea and we got so many complaints about Sky that, you know what? Guess what? We can't do that anymore. And so it's got to be equal. Everyone's got to be able to do it.
Well, if that's the case, then why can't I do Savage or Ultra Bahamut Savage mode without clearing OS4 first?
Because that's not for you.
That's dumb. I should be able to do Bahamut Ultra Savage mode also, even if I don't raid.
Dude,
that's the thing I want.
But again, that's the 5% of the content that they lock behind any kind of wall.
Well, that's
at all.
That's terrible. I should be able to do that.
Honestly, I think it's terrible that a part of them says, okay, we're going to give in just a little bit, because I feel like that's more of an insult than actually giving some content.
And also, Juxta, I know you don't mean that. That's how bad you are at trying to pull that off.
No, I was talking for that portion of the player base.
I know.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But that's how bad you are at that.
What?
We could tell it was your ironic voice. I don't know if you were trying to sell it as authentic or not, but...
Did I sound like I was trying to sell it?
No.
Not even close. Let's go to our phone lines and talk to Shiro Eark of Moogle. What's going on, Shiro?
Hello, guys.
Welcome to the Limit Break Radio. What's up?
We appreciate you calling. I feel like it's been a long time since we've had a caller, so thank you, Shiro.
Yeah, it's pretty, maybe 2 or 3 months I called you back.
Oh, okay. All right.
Fair enough.
That's what's up.
So today I wanted to talk about the red content. I have a big problem with the red content. So for me, who come from World of Warcraft, when I play in art progress, I do a lot of boss in maybe 1 month. When I come to FF14 to switch MMO, I play to hard progress in FF14, and the problem was for this extension, I do 4 boss in 1 week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And the fact that we're gonna go back to the content, since I've cleaned it, in 4 months, I do nothing.
Yeah.
So the game have a big problem of content about raid, dungeon, and something else that quest and other things.
It's
well, in theory, Eureka is supposed to be for you.
Yeah. But the problem with that is too. You said you cleared in 1 or 2 weeks, and then you have 4 months of no content. It's even longer than that, since you get the raid content, then you get the Evilise, the group raid content, which isn't really end game content, and then you have the next patch. So really, you're waiting like 6 6 to 8 months in between raid patches?
And in fact, I've dropped FF14 maybe 1 or 2 months after the clean because I don't have something else to do. Since I need to raid Bahamut, Bahamut doesn't count as a raid progress for me. So I was just looking and say, oh, I think I'm gonna drop the game because that's not enough to do progress or kill dungeon, kill raid, and this is really too lazy.
So there you go, Square Enix. One of the people that your super ultra hard 5% raid content was aimed for wasn't enough to keep them.
Well, but that we've known that is a problem for a long time, right? Like, I mean, this is not some fucking secret. It's not.
Nika, let me ask you this: if you had finished, if you had caught up and you had beat 04S Savage, and you had stopped playing for whatever reason, let's say you were taking a break, right, and your group had disbanded until the next big patch cycle comes around. Do you think that the single ultimate Bahamut fight would have brought everyone back?
No.
No.
I think that anyone
no
who is
hesitation
still,
there.
I think anyone who is still casually playing would probably play again until beating it before quitting. But I think that if people had actually like unsubbed, that would not have brought them back.
What would at this point, do you think?
A different style of raid that was not a boss in a circle room. Anything different than a boss in a circle room. Anything.
I mean, that's fair. That's totally fair. I'm not.
But it's also end game content that's challenging and it upgrades your character end game. So
listen to how desperate some of our pleas are, though. We're just like Square Enix. Anything. Literally anything.
Because, like, while I know that the Bahamut fight is fun and unique, it's still just boss in a circle room. So literally
three bosses
in a circle room.
But it's like a gauntlet style. I don't know. It's not. It's not.
There's still just always a single boss at a time.
It's not new.
I mean,
if it was like 3 bosses at once, I don't know. Maybe.
I think there is actually.
What?
3? You fight all 3 at one time at one point in the fight.
Interesting.
For as much as that's interesting,
but it's not like
not enough.
It's not interesting
style of raid. It's the same.
Thanks for the call. We appreciate it, Shiro. If you want to call Limit Break Radio on Skype, 810-515-8715. LimitBreakRadio.com/Discord is how you connect with us. We'll be happy to get you on the show. And we got plenty to talk about, including a couple of interviews, correct?
That's right. We're actually just about to finish up the Eurogamer interview.
Okay,
We're just getting into the meat of it. So I would actually like to solicit anyone.
Good, I'm hungry.
Of course you are. I would like to solicit calls specifically from anyone who started their Final Fantasy gaming experience at, let's say, 10 upwards. Okay, I want to specifically talk to you. So
ages 10 and up?
No. Final Fantasy 10 and up.
10
like, for example, Skuro started with FF13.
Okay.
My girlfriend started at FF10.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this last little excerpt here, it says the outlook, and that's his outlook of being open and taking what players say into account when developing your games, has had a knock-on effect. It's hard not to see the influence of Yoshida's approach in the development of Final Fantasy 15, and in director Tabata's embrace of the community throughout the project. There was never an explicit exchange of ideas. Giving advice in development is difficult, says Yoshida. There's no one way to make a game, but there has been a company-wide change. The comeback of Final Fantasy XIV changed our mindset. We have to make decisions earlier and have a more honest attitude with players to receive feedback. The mindset has changed, and there's definitely been some impact. And I would also like to add that Tabata has, in interviews, said that the way he developed 15 and the way that he took feedback from his players, that going forward, stay with Final Fantasy 16, that he absolutely intends to get player feedback in on the development process more.
Shameful.
And apparently, this article over at Eurogamer posits that because of this, the series is going to be changed for the better. Who in this room feels like the Final Fantasy franchise has been getting better? Juxta?
No.
Nero?
No, definitely not.
Nika?
Not as an overall. I think there are aspects of it that are better, but there as like an overall product, definitely not.
Me either.
All right.
And we know that Ascalia would agree as well. If you disagree, please call.
Yeah, feel free. But right now we've got Strife on the line from Nika's Raid Party. He was also a guest host for one of the episodes I was gone. Strife, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Hello.
Good. All right, so I see in my notes here that you started with FF10.
That's correct. Kingdom Hearts, if you count it, and Final Fantasy X is when I started.
I do not count Kingdom Hearts, sir. You get that bullshit out of here.
That is my favorite
But
Final
if
Fantasy
Kingdom Hearts
game.
also then gets you into
Some people count it, that's why I said it.
To be fair, Kingdom Hearts 1 was Squaresoft, wasn't it? I think it was.
Yes, it was.
Anyway.
And it has Final Fantasy characters in it.
That's fine. Whatever it is, that's fine.
Okay, so, Strife, let me ask you then. I assume you've since gone back and played through some of the older installations, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yep, played 6, 7, 8 at least. I think I've played a little bit of 9 and 4.
Okay, and I mean, overall, what do you think of the Final Fantasy series? Like, where would you say it was at its strongest, and at what point did you notice a decline or a rise in quality?
I think it actually peaked with 10 because it was the first one with voice acting, and it was such a strong series for storytelling that kind of brought out things that no one had seen before in that series. And it was a PS2, it was new technology at the time, and I think it really just evolved the series and peaked out around there. I think that there were aspects of 12 and 13 that were an improvement, but because they started getting so experimental, I don't know if it was an overall improvement for the series. There were definitely some issues. So like 10.
Okay, and this is going to seem random, but how old are you, Strife?
27.
27. Okay. So he shares, similar age range as us, and he shares a similar viewpoint as us. But what I think is happening, what I think the problem is, when we were in the heyday of Final Fantasy, 6, 7, 8, 9, Final Fantasies were coming out like every 2 to 3 years. In fact, I think between either 7 and 8 or 8 and 9, there was almost maybe just a little over a year's time between the two releases of those. They were coming out fast. Then when we get to 10, 12, 13, and obviously with 15, we're looking at huge release dates, upwards of 10 years with Final Fantasy 15. And so I got to thinking that there are people who aren't considered kids anymore who may have started with 10, 12, 13, or even 15 as their Final Fantasy, right? So when we start crying about how Final Fantasy isn't Final Fantasy anymore, there are some people that it is for them, that they never went back and played 7, 8, 9. They don't know what the greatness of the JRPs were. And so when they play 13 and they give feedback, it's positive feedback because they don't know any better. Our own Skuro started with 13, and guess what he thought of it? Well, it was all right. Because he doesn't know any better.
Because he's
I know people that have played since like FF6 who still thought 13 was overall a good game.
And that's fine. There obviously are going to be some people. I mean, look, everyone
13
here
was passable.
Everyone here
13-2 was passable.
Everyone here even agrees that Final Fantasy 15 just by itself was a good game, right? It was solid. It was
okay.
I liked it probably as much. Actually, I liked it more than I liked Nier Automata because S9 was absolutely insufferable.
No, that was a fantastic game.
Absolutely insufferable, okay? But the point is, they're taking feedback from fans. And so apparently the stuff that we see in FF15 is what fans want. But whenever we talk about this, we talk about how they're basically gutting all the aspects of Final Fantasy that we know and love and remember. One of the biggest recent criticisms that I have about FF15 was if you took any character from any Final Fantasy whatsoever and you plunked them down in the middle of New York or Detroit or Chicago, they're going to look out of place, aren't they? But if you plunk down the characters of FF15, how out of place are they really going to look? You're just going to think, oh, a bunch of goth kids.
Why does that have to be your deciding factor? Like it's
I'm not
every FF game.
I'm not saying
every FF game has had a different feel in terms of its aesthetic.
I know. Yes, Nika, exactly. Every FF game has had a different feel that is unique. I'm not saying that is my
FF15 definitely has a unique aesthetic.
Hold on. It does. It is unique to every other Final Fantasy. But when you put it into our world, it's not unique. Like the fact that all Final Fantasies have a unique...
It's a combination of like a modern feel and some machina, like there's a lot. There's like, it doesn't feel modern day. It's not like I would just see those characters. Like, it doesn't feel like that at all. It's definitely a unique aesthetic.
But there is more of a modern aspect to it than there has been any Final Fantasy before, because they all have technology, they all have airships, so obviously that stuff is modern, but it feels a little bit too real life. I mean, you're just driving around in a car. Okay, it flies, but Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has a flying car too.
Right, which is also not real life, but...
Right. There's a good reason though that 15 is like that, Callow, and it's because if you remember the original trailer for Versus 13 and the original marketing material and all that bullshit that they had back then, it says right there, this is a fantasy based on reality. That's what they were going for from day one. Right. So that's why. And they never intended that to be classic high fantasy or even FF7's, sci-fi versus religion and magic. You know what I mean? They never were going for that. They were always going for how would a Final Fantasy play out in a world that's closer to our reality.
Okay, and to their credit, they did do a really good job of that. And I've always been a staunch supporter of when you're reviewing something or when you're analyzing something, you should look at it based on what you think the creators were trying to say or what they were trying to accomplish, not necessarily what it is that you prefer. That's why I can look at Final Fantasy 15 and say, that's a good game. But as a longtime Final Fantasy fan, it's also, I think, my opinion, I'm not the only one who shares this, that Final Fantasy has definitely started to change in a very drastic way that they don't feel like Final Fantasies anymore. Nero, when we were talking on the I think it was the Checkpoint podcast. No, it was we were talking about Pokemon. Joe mentioned that if you were to watch someone play Pokemon Red, right? You walk out of the room, you come back in, and they're playing Ultra Sun and Moon. They look vastly different. But when you look at it, you know it's a Pokemon game without a doubt.
Yep.
If someone was playing FF9, you walked out and came back in, and they were playing FF15.
You wouldn't even think that they were part of the same game franchise.
No, not unless you knew, obviously.
Like,
bull crap.
Like 7 and 8 look so different.
No, you wouldn't.
But you could tell. Looking at them, you could tell. That is a Square Enix game right there. You could tell.
I can still tell that's a Square Enix game. I feel like the thing is with the Pokemon games, every Pokemon game has been the same, which is why so many people check out of Pokemon. Like, people came back for Sun and Moon for the nostalgia, for the marketing they were doing it because of Pokemon Go. But how many people are going to pick up the next Pokemon? Distinctly less people.
Actually, I think
up Pokemon Sun and Moon.
I think more people bought Ultra Sun and Moon.
And because it's coming to the Switch now, and that's
within obviously Pokemon Sun and Moon was out longer.
I know some of you played it, but I checked out completely at Diamond and Pearl because every single game, while the
I checked out at Gen 1,
the same. Like, I never played Black and White, X and Y because they were the same thing. Pokemon never evolved. And that got boring. And I feel like, there are hits and misses in the FF franchise. I think one of its strengths is that it changes so much from game to game, and that you can play FF1 and FF15.
That's been the thing that holds Final Fantasy as a franchise back.
I disagree strongly.
See, I think
it's because Final Fantasy fundamentally has lost its identity as a game series.
Yeah, because I'd say its strength is actually what both of you are saying. You're right, Nika. From 7 to 8 to 9 to 10, there were some very, very different changes within those games. But Nero, you're absolutely right too, that every Final Fantasy still has a very core concept to it, and that, Nika, is the strength. The ability to change and adapt while also feeling familiar.
Well, yeah, FF15's plot is literally cannot be more Final Fantasy. There's a team of good guys going after the bad guy who's trying to get the crystal to take over the world. Like, that is every fucking Final Fantasy game, and it is still this Final Fantasy game. How more Final Fantasy can you get?
That's where it stops.
I mean,
like, that is Final Fantasy at its core. Look at the Super Nintendo or whatever the first system was, and look at PS4. Back when turn-based was a thing, they did not have the technology
turn-based is still a thing.
You know what I mean? Back when the games were RPGs and JRPGs were beginning, they did not have the technology and the power to make what it feels like feel like real life, to feel like the action that what it's supposed to be. Like, clicking attack is supposed to simulate people in a battle attacking each other, but they did not have that kind of engine power. You get to FF7, you have basically an open world with a world map and the towns, but there has to be a little town and a little tiny map that you zone into because they didn't have the graphical and the mechanical power to make that kind of game. Now they do, and you're telling me they should still stick with the old shit?
So wait, are you saying that that Pokemon needs to change its battle system up and it needs to
a little bit?
Really?
Yes.
Oh, Nika.
Away from it.
What's one of our big complaints about Pokemon Go's battling? That it's not the same as the game.
Exactly.
It's because all you're doing is tapping the screen. I think they could have done more with it that still made it feel essentially Pokemon.
See, here's the thing. Here, Nika, and that's a cute opinion. All right.
By the way, I'm sorry,
it's
guys.
Adorable. It's adorable.
Why would you bring Pokemon into this?
It's adorable.
That's a trap.
But here's the thing, though, is that when Square Enix decided, yeah, okay, we're not going to do the turn-based thing anymore. The turn-based is like dead, man. The industry's moving away from turn-based. That it lost a lot of the defining factors that made Final Fantasy Final Fantasy. Many of the tactical elements, many of the tactical decisions got stripped out. Even when you go and you look at 13 and 15, they don't have the same tactical elements that even something like 12 has. And 12 was even a pretty far departure for me to even go, yeah, all right, this is still kind of a Final Fantasy game. What Square Enix looked at their series that had been successful for the better part of 15 years at that point, what they looked at their series and said, well, the reason people buy Final Fantasy is because it's the best looking game on the market and because we tell the most compelling story, which both of those things are actually accurate. Yeah. Both of those things are actually true. But I don't think that's what makes a Final Fantasy game a Final Fantasy game.
Because other games do the same thing. Tell compelling narratives and have great graphics.
Right.
That's not something that's hard to do.
And hang on. I'm driving towards a point, Nika. All right? And the thing about Square Enix is that at the time they made those decisions, they were the ones who were the gatekeepers of the amazing graphics because they were the ones that were pushing it in that direction. You had the Spirits Within. You had all of the great CGI work that they'd been doing. All of those amazing artists that they had been making and building over time, cultivating over time. And you had all of that talent there. But then suddenly, underneath them, that technology got democratized because Epic decided we don't want to make as much money off of this as Square Enix does or as id does. And they came and they built the Unreal Engine, and then every game ever afterwards was made in the Unreal Engine because you didn't need to build a fucking graphics engine to be able to make a game anymore. And Square Enix went, oh no, our method of being able to make money, which by the way, was the licensed engine, the crystal tools that they threw out, that was the way that Square Enix as a company was going to make money. They were going to license this set of tools out to other developers, except no other developers were buying. You want to know why? Because they had the Unreal Engine that they could go with at any time that they wanted. And so Square Enix lost their business model. And this was right around the time that 14 was being made. Because guess what? Crystal Tools was shit. Crystal Tools was objectively awful. It was great. It put out more polygons, but it also put out more useless data than it did create a wonderful looking graphics experience. Okay? So you have that. And Square Enix went, well, if people aren't going to buy our games anymore because they don't look the best, we don't know why they're going to buy them. And by that point, they had migrated too far from what makes Final Fantasy a Final Fantasy game a Final Fantasy game. Because it's not great graphics anymore. Suddenly, everyone can put out great graphics. Now, what are you going to do? Now, AAA development has bloated to the point where it's unsustainable. We're not the only ones saying that. Cliffy B's saying that. Anyone who's involved with AAA game development is going, listen, it's either loot boxes or $90 games or we can't keep making this shit. Never mind what Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice has to say about that model, but that's what we're hearing from the AAA game developers.
Now, Nika, before you respond too, can you fashion an argument that has nothing to do with turn-based combat? Because if they would have put turn-based combat into 12, 13, or 15, it would not change my opinions of the game.
Yeah, the problematic aspects of those games were not about the combat. So we can put a pin in that discussion for another day.
Well, what I was trying to say, though, is that while I believe things like 13 were very horrible because of the other reasons, its battle system was one of the biggest ones. But I believe that, gosh, I'm losing my train of thought because I tried to talk like 4 times and now I'm losing it. That at least Square Enix knew that because they were losing business, they had to take risk. Like I feel like as horrible as 13 was, I commend them for trying, which is in comparison to 14, which they're not trying shit at all. And so with 15, I feel like there is a lot of improvement, but a lot of things that, again, that I believe that they tried, they attempted many things, mastered none of them. And I believe that that's because they're trying to figure out what works. They're missing the mark in so many ways, but they are trying. And I feel like if you go back to a turn-based battle system or you change whatever is wrong with the game that you feel like is wrong with the game, it's not going to feel like, because Square Enix has its beautiful graphics and its immersive storytelling, like players are immersed in the game. You feel like you're in the game, and then all of a sudden the characters are standing there bouncing and swinging every 5 seconds, but they look like real people on the screen. You're not telling me that would break your immersion from the game?
Oh, come on, stop it. Listen.
It absolutely would for me. If I had a realistic
having those
attack once every minute with a character, I would sell it back.
Nika, having those representational battle sequences, I never took away from that my character was jumping and defying the laws of goddamn physics like a Dragon Ball Z character. That's
absolutely we're doing that.
No! Why? My character? Why? Cloud can suddenly fly now and hover? Why?
Oh, he didn't. He does. He jumps. He fucking like Omni Slash. Friggin' Tifa's like crazy beat rush bullshit. Like, yes, the characters have always been doing that.
But that makes sense in a representational battle sequence. It doesn't make sense in a fucking open world context.
Power. Yes, FF7 was as open world as you could get on the PS1. It absolutely was. And
they still teleports around.
Yeah, not teleports around like a fucking like Goku. Fucking that's the part of the Final Fantasy series that I think has lost its identity, is because Square Enix now thinks that it's fundamentally Japanese things that sell games. It's J-pop or J-rock fucking artists as your main characters. That'll sell games. Did it?
Yeah,
I mean, apparently it did, because everyone in the chat thinks that, FF15's so great. Jizz.
FF15 is a good game. There's a lot wrong with it.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. There's a lot wrong with it, but it is a good overall game.
No, it's not.
To your point, Nika,
sounds better than
the two things that I do want to agree with you is that, yes, so it does seem like Square Enix in certain cases is floundering, and at least, yes, they are trying new things, as is evident by the fact that we went from hallway simulator to super open world FF15.
Right, and it didn't necessarily work, but
I can't wait to see what happens with 16.
Argent Esper saying, I don't know about that. Noctis's anime ripoff battle sequence seemed to be something that was unique for him. Okay, explain lightning then. How can lightning fall from the, like fucking 30 stories up and still be fine? These people don't have fucking superheroes.
Can throw herself off a cliff and not die. Like shit like that happen. Like this character.
Then you've got to justify it through the fucking narrative. It can't just be there and inherent with random people that you meet. Like, that's fucking retarded. That's the dumbest shit.
Nika, you said you have Persona 5. You just haven't played it, right?
Correct.
All right. Yeah, we're going to eventually come back to this, because you need to play that and tell us how not immersed in that world that you are because of turn-based combat.
But it also looks like an anime. It doesn't look like it's real life. That's what I'm talking about. When you have a real life character on the screen that looks like you.
Okay,
and then all of a sudden they're just bouncing up and down in one spot. I can't get into that.
Why doesn't the art style so turn you off, Nika? Like, you've never been able to read a book or watch a different medium that's not a realistic art style and put yourself in a character's perspective?
Theater, for example.
Oh no, I absolutely can. Literally every single story I read, I am super immersed with.
Right, so you've never watched an anime or an animation of some kind and put yourself in that character's shoes?
Nope, every single time.
Have, well, then your argument's completely invalid and you're crazy.
It is not.
Lord Chaos, she became a Lassie. Oh, okay. Thank you for the Deus Ex Machina explanation. Fucking asshole. Oh yeah, they're Lassie. Clearly, they can jump off at anything.
Yeah, no.
And to fucking Fusion X's point. Well, in 11 we can, and 14 we can jump off of whatever ledge we want. Okay. Well, in 14 there's actually falling damage, and in 11 they didn't know how to code falling damage into a fucking PS2 game. So yeah, no, I'm willing to forgive at least some parts of that.
I was gonna say, look,
fuck's sake, people. These are shit excuses.
Stripe is misunderstanding what I was trying to say. I'm saying that there are so many ways to be immersed, but then if something like that all of a sudden feels like it's jarring with what the overall presentation is, it rips you out of the immersion.
With as realistic as Square Enix is making, Nika, you think that turn-based doesn't have a place in realistic graphics.
Yes.
So if they were to, let's say, turn back and do something stylized like Persona 5, then turn-based would be fine.
I think so, yeah. I think it's just because the representation of what it is and how it feels is because I so much insert myself into what I'm seeing in front of me that if it doesn't look and feel like it meshes, it's going to the entire time I'm just going to sit there and feel awkward.
I actually kind of get that a little bit. A little bit.
I think that's why another reason why Bravely Default worked, and another reason why I say it's better on mobile, because the graphics on mobile are nowhere near like a PS4. And I feel like it works a lot better in that context.
So it doesn't matter if it's on mobile or if it's on the platform. It just depends on the art style, Nika.
In the overall presentation of it, I suppose.
Just to play devil's advocate, keep in mind though that, while I make sense what you're saying, Nika, like you want to be immersed. I get how the more realistic the graphics, the more crazy anime, like flippant, right, that characters become. I get how you could be jarred from that, but keep in mind, not everyone who plays these games is there to be immersed. Some people just like passive storytelling. Some people just like the gameplay. Like, there's a lot of reasons people like the franchise. So
FF10 worked great, and it had the same thing here that you said that you're, not happy with.
Yeah, so it's like Final Fantasy 10 not realistic enough? Is 12 not realistic enough? 13 not realistic enough? But 15 was too realistic for turn-based?
Was hit or miss for me. I thought it was an upgrade because you got to swap your characters out mid-battle, and there was a lot more you could do with FF10's turn-based than you could with like FF9's. So I thought it was definitely an upgrade and it was on the right track. But I will say there were a few battles where I felt like it should have been more fast-paced, and it wasn't. And I'll say I did kind of lose it. 10 is probably my favorite FF, but there was so much that I feel like they could have done more with it, with how much they upgraded to the PS2. But that's why they did so many freaking flipping cutscenes in FF10, because they're like, look how pretty we can make it.
Yeah, okay, but listen, if FF15 took 10 years to fucking make, whatever the reason for that was, and it goes too photorealistic, then why wouldn't Square Enix at least attempt to try something a little bit different, especially now that they've been doing this for 10 years, and do something a little bit different with Final Fantasy 16? And they've got to figure out how to cut down on cost. Okay, well,
stylized graphics also cuts down on the time needed as well.
Sure.
Yeah,
and then that way, if you want to make a game full of K-pop fuckboys, you can go and do it in another franchise that doesn't call itself Final Fantasy, and it doesn't do damage to the overall fucking brand.
What if they called Final Fantasy 15 Final Reality 1?
There you go. You might be onto something.
Working title.
But you're the one sitting here that's saying, "Oh, it looks so realistic in a real world." Oh, but they're jumping around and warping around. It's fantasy.
No, we're fine with that, Nika. We were saying that in regards to what you were saying. You were saying that in FF7, what they do wouldn't look right in a realistic setting, yet you have Noctis doing that by warping around.
That's not what I'm saying. I am able, as a very
he has a ring that explains
person,
that.
A literature major, like somebody who gets really into books and literature and the way that it's told, I can immerse myself in any world if the world is presented properly. This was presented to me as a world where magic exists. It made me believe that. So then that doesn't rip me out of it at all.
Yeah, okay.
So then again, that's not a problem.
Well, every world where magic exists, you also have Dragon Ball Z style fights.
I was going to say, then that's not a problem. Again, with turn-based, that's a problem with the way the world is presented. And honestly, I think that's the thing that I've been trying to get through to you this whole time. The fact that Pokemon still does it, the fact that Persona does it, the fact that it worked with all the other FFs, it's not turn-based itself that has ever been the problem. It's always within the way that it is presented.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah, not entirely wrong. I lost my train of thought again.
She still can't agree with you.
Well, we have.
No, I agree. I understand more what your point is. Like, you're not entirely wrong. I just feel like.
But you're not entirely right either.
If somehow they could present to me a world that looks so realistic and has magic, but for some reason people don't know how to swing more than once every 60 seconds, if you can somehow make me believe that that's like a feasible battle system for that world which are presented in, like there's some kind of motion block on people, and like they made me believe that it was real.
God.
I might be able to get behind it.
Nika.
Are we still talking
so
about
you can't suspend your immersion for like 3 seconds?
Thank you.
To make a fucking decision, right?
Or how about in Final Fantasy 15 where you have an action bar that depletes as you're running, but if you press the button at the right time, then you have more stamina again? That's fine with you, Nika? Is that fine?
I mean, come on. You're
really not suspended.
You're really parsing out very, very odd points to try to argue.
What allows me to feel like the world is believable or not?
In every form of media, you have to have a certain suspension of disbelief.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
But it has to also make me believe it. Like, there are a lot of stories where the worlds are presented properly, but if something feels off, like, I'll tell you, my biggest pet peeve in literature is when you write a 3-year-old character and they act like they're 15. Like, I hate like that kind of stuff rips me out of the story. I'm like, man, you have such a great story. The characters are great. Then here's this child who's supposed to be a prodigy, but me, who knows how child develop, no matter how big of a prodigy that 3-year-old is, there's no way they can comprehend things on the level of a 15-year-old. You just cannot do it.
That's fine.
So you write a character, it rips me out, and all of a sudden that piece of literature is garbage to me.
That's fine. I can.
But a battle system in FF15 or in a Final Fantasy game is going to do the same thing.
So Juxta, I no longer have asthma. My sprint button is just broke.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Just try pressing the button at the right time.
It's broke.
You'll get better.
Strife, we appreciate having you on while Nika has just taken the floor and taken the course of the conversation. No, that's the problem, Nika, is that you're not letting Strife get a word in edgewise.
He was our caller.
No, you were cutting me out.
It's the average rate night. It's fine.
No, yeah. I'm cutting off Nika only to make good points. So,
Strife, I love you.
Strife, thanks for hanging out. Was there any end thought that you wanted to give us before we let you go?
Yes, one last thing. So I don't know who said it earlier. I think it was Callow, but someone mentioned that, between 7 and 8 and 9, even 10, it felt like the series was iterating, right? And it felt like there was some small improvements, but it still felt Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
I think the reason for that, if you look at the timeline, is that there was actually only a year or two for most of the franchise between each game.
Yep. Yeah.
And as soon as I think it was 12 came out, suddenly there's these huge gaps. There's I think it's 6 or 7 years between,
and that's also when Spirits Within broke Squaresoft and they had to be bought out by Enix and they became Square Enix. That's where all the problems started. Fuck you, Enix.
No, and honestly, when you have a merger that size and you have two companies that are coming together that are that monolithic, you're of course going to get a lot of decisions like that. And, it makes a lot of sense why it took so long, but you also had, the departure of a lot of talent. Hironobu Sakaguchi went off to start Mistwalker Studios. You had Nobuo Uematsu, who also left his exclusive contract with Square Enix. So, you did have a talent drain around that time as well. So you have a lot of new talent and you've got a lot of new people who have got to figure out how to work together for maybe the first time. And so it makes sense that maybe, for 5 years, for maybe even 10 years, that your development is thrown into chaos. But Strife, I think that, you bring up a really good point that, you look at the amount of downtime that the series gets now between entries. And I think that's a very apt observation that, It's not necessarily a one-to-one indication that there's something going wrong, but that the development has certainly changed around the Final Fantasy franchise, and I don't know that it's been for the better. But it has definitely been since 11 that this has happened, and I have to believe that at least in some small part that was due to Hironobu Sakaguchi's influence over the franchise.
I'm sure there's probably also some of that can be attributed to the whole, AAA ballooning crap as well.
I mean, yes, that is part of it too.
But I know that when each Final Fantasy was coming out, from what I remember looking back on the different games, like FF7 was a huge hit. FF8 comes out and they're like, man, it's okay, but it's not FF7. It really doesn't feel like a Final Fantasy. Then FF9 comes out and they're like, man, it's not FF8. FF8 was a Final Fantasy. FF9 really doesn't feel like a Final Fantasy. Then 10 comes out and they're like, man, this is weird. It's not like FF9.
No,
never felt like that.
No,
I've never heard that.
Not even as really
it was going back to the roots.
Of the series. But there was, FF9 at first, there were people that really appreciated it, went back to the FF5 style, but it wasn't the realistic. So then people complained about it. But then when the next one came out, they loved it. And I feel like even with FF12, there was so much backlash with FF12. But then did you guys see that? Was it a 4chan list of the top 100?
Don't even. Get out of here.
Are you referencing a 4chan list, Nika?
This was a fairly good list.
Come on.
Because it was so big, you could just have everything on there, and as long as you agree with 5 of them, you're like, oh, okay.
Can I use my Nika mute?
I mean,
it'll mute you too.
But listen, I feel like FF games over time then get a feel of, oh, this is what a Final Fantasy was, because of the nostalgia of it, because of the feel of it. I say give FF15 6 or 7 years, and people will say that about
no, I don't.
Every
here's their deal breaker, Nika. People don't say that about Final Fantasy 13
at all.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. 13
at all.
is the
so your theory is bust.
And the thing is that 12, there were some. 12 still had some turn-based-ish elements. It actually felt a lot like 11 did, and 11 made some concessions on the turn-based portion of the combat because it had to work online, and that people really understood. And then it was 13 came out, and it was like, the fuck is all of this shit?
But to be fair, 13 stripped a lot of FF things that 15 still has, the type of exploration, the battle theme, town. There's so many things that were not in 13 that are in any FF that FF15 does.
But see, Nika, I don't remember that sentiment at all. I do remember that going from 7 to 8, where people were like, man,
people hated the draw system.
8 looks so good, but it's not a good game. I do remember that. And then 9 came out, and 9 was a 1,000,000% return to form.
I can
literally everyone I knew, every magazine I was reading at the time was just Final Fantasy fucking 9, and it was see. Here's the thing, and this is why I remember this so specifically, Nika.
It's because you went on to play online to read the code.
No, it's because at the time I was such a big fan of Legend of Dragoon, and I was going, guys, you got to play Legend of Dragoon, and everyone was like, I'm playing FF9. I'm like, I'm playing Final Fantasy 9 too, but I just finished Legend of Dragoon, and you need to fucking play it. And none of my friends played Legend of Dragoon, and it used to fucking Nika, you were not my friend when I was fucking 12. Okay,
I know that, but I'm saying I knew a lot of people that played Dragoon.
Also, keep in mind too that Sakaguchi himself says that FF9 is the Final Fantasy.
Yeah. But here's the thing, and this is the one that blows the hole into all of this, Nika, is that the black hole of positivity, which I know that those two things don't normally go together, but the black hole of positivity that exists around Final Fantasy X, now with the fucking rose-colored glasses that everyone puts on about it too, is obnoxious. And I fucking hated 10. I used to fucking bag on 10 because I was like, fucking Legend of Dragoon was a better love story, man. I swear to God, I was that fucking guy. It was a better love story, wasn't it? Yes,
You're
thank you.
still that guy.
I am still that. Legend of Dragoon.
Yes, it was better than Tidus and Yuna.
Guys, Tidus and Yuna had underwater sex.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
It's hot.
You're not
Delicious.
wrong. Anyway.
But
anyway, but no,
you're not wrong. I agree with you about all of that. But I will say that like almost every single person I knew was like, yeah, FF9 was good, blah blah blah. And then when they replayed it as an adult, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how
good it actually was.
But that was actually different for me.
But that's different from what you're talking about, though.
Played it,
yeah.
I feel like so now everyone considers FF9 one of the greatest ones, and while people liked it then, they didn't feel it was so great until they got older. And I feel like that's where the sentiment comes from now.
Well, guess what? We're all older right now, Nika. Our opinions of 15 aren't going to change.
Yeah, well.
Like what you're talking about is having perspective as an adult, because I was one of those people that played FF9, and when I did, FF10 was already in development, and we knew a lot about it, right? And so one of the reasons that I didn't like FF9 was because they're like these little cartoon characters, and I'm looking at what 10 is, and I'm like, what the fuck is this bullshit? I felt like it was rushed because they were working on FF10 on the PS2.
Yeah.
But then, when I became an adult and I went back and played it again, I'm like, holy shit, this is
like, wow, it's a great game, right?
But since we're all adults now, there's not much more perspective that we're going to gain when we go back and play FF15 and go, we were wrong, guys. This hot topic shit is making a comeback. Get out the fishnet sleeves.
But you look at the type of media that's coming out nowadays, and it's because all of us who grew up with this media are now adults. Everything that's coming out is for the nostalgia. So you know what they're going to do? They're going to release an FF that plays on the nostalgia. And you're like, oh, see, look, it's stylized.
They're already doing that with re-releases.
On nostalgia, and everyone's going to buy it. And you're like, see, it's successful because it was good. And you're like, no, it's because they know their target audience. They know that the nostalgia is what sells right now. That's where they're going to go. So it's
they don't know their target audience.
They totally do.
They don't know their target audience, and their development takes so long that they lose their target audience before it comes out.
That's such a great point,
I
too.
agree.
Everyone who is interested in fucking J-pop is now they now have actual jobs, and they have to listen to fucking Katy Perry all day.
That's where Pokemon succeeded with Sun and Moon, and that's where a lot of movies are succeeding right now.
We're back to Pokemon.
Yeah, how did we get back to Pokemon?
Stop.
Well, but you're not.
Strife, Nika, let Strife get in his final comments so that he can move on with his day.
I was just gonna say, the whole point I was trying to make here is that there's so many things that happen as a ripple effect when they wait that long in between titles, right? The whole point of them going from one to the next every 2 years or so is because that they can iterate, and they know their audience, and they know what people are looking for. It's not just the technology gap. It's not just the things that happen around the 2010, 2011 timeframe. I know that was also a factor, but it's also the fact that if you know your target audience in 2010, by 2012, you still have a good idea of how they're evolving and changing. But if you wait 6 fucking years, shit's not going to make sense. And that's
great point.
What happened.
Great point. Strife, thanks for the call, man. We appreciate it, as always.
Also appreciate your patience with Nika.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, did not dominate the conversation.
I'm sorry that Raid Night is probably always like that.
It is actually not.
Uh-huh.
I'll ask Senpai later.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Please do.
Anyway, if you want to give us a call, and if you want to bitch at us and tell us why we're wrong, Limit Break Radio on Skype, 810-515-8715, limitbreakradio.com/Discord to join in on the conversation. So how much of this interview do we have?
You know what? That's pretty much the Eurogame interview. I mean, we went even so beyond where I thought that conversation would take us. Again, I apologize. I did not mean to put Nika on the defensive about FF15, guys.
I'm happy with that conversation.
I mean, we did actually make a little bit of ground with you, I feel like. You're still bad at stuff.
But also, you also understand a little bit where I'm coming from, and I understand more about where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, it's still wrong, but...
Win.
Yeah, it doesn't make you any more right.
Yeah,
you're super
sorry.
Opinions cannot be wrong.
I think Trump's a great person.
That's an opinion, right?
That's an opinion.
Yeah.
Super wrong.
Am I not wrong, Nika?
Asshole, but wrong is not the correct word.
I think that Juxta is thin.
That's
a
fact.
Objective opinion.
Yeah, it's not a.
I mean,
it's not an opinion.
Like, who would you think is fat then?
I mean, people that grow up with like a lot of obese people in their life might feel that way. Like, it's definitely subjective. You can't.
All right, but we do have this interview from DualShock.
So are we? Wait, we're saying that Chris isn't a fat piece of shit now?
No, he's definitely a fat piece of shit. That was an example of a wrong opinion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right.